everyone. This is Sean. Sean is a client of mine. We've been working together for just about a year now, and Sean has been really great for me in that he brings up these really amazing questions. One of the things that my clients often tell me is that I don't speak in layman's terms. I'm often speaking in a way that's just overly scientific or just goes above their heads. And so Sean has really been able to bring me back down to earth and help me communicate things in a way that's even more helpful for my clients. And so we thought that we would do kind of a Q&A or maybe just discussion about some of the things that we talk about, like between us, but also just things that are common topics within my practice. And hopefully this helps other people, and we'll share this with people who are working with me, and also maybe some people on YouTube and whoever else wants to watch.
So first of all, yeah, Christina has been amazing because I am like Curious George of needing to know everything of health, and I'm almost it's for dummies because I'm not. I mean, that's a funny sort of analogy in the dummies courses, but I really feel like I want to know it all, and Christina is brilliant in the science, which I really appreciate how much you have the knowledge. But I also find you're really helpful for letting me understand it at my level. And I have always so many questions because I have so many things going on in my body. And one of the big things is, every type of inflammation, autoimmune. I've also been struggling with something called akathisia, which really affects the nervous system. And the way that you can take me into whatever area I'm in and sort of try and figure it out is one of my favorite things about Christina. I love it. And I always feel like I'm taking so much of her time. So this is kind of a dream for me, to ask these questions. So first of all, maybe should we start right into the peptides? Because I've been blown away lately. The newest thing that Christina's brought to my life are these peptides. And I was kind of kicking and screaming a bit about doing it because I'm always afraid of starting something new that's so different. But she talked me through it and she got me to finally do it. And I'm actually putting peptides in a needle in my belly. And it's been so beautiful. I mean, the last few days. And I really want to understand, maybe, Christina, you can explain to me, why is this happening? Why, knowing me, why is this working for me and what's happening in my body?
Yeah, so I mean, peptides are chains of amino acids, and they have been turned into powder form, which can be turned into subcutaneous injections, or some of them have been actually made into oral supplements, but the oral supplements are not available in Canada. So in Canada, all we have access to is this powder substance that are these chains of amino acids that we can reconstitute into a liquid and then inject subcutaneously. So when we inject them, they're like messages to the body or messages to the immune system. And for KPV specifically, it's considered an anti-inflammatory peptide, so it really calms down the immune system. It's also antifungal, so it reduces fungal or yeast overgrowth, and it's anti-SIBO as well. And so SIBO is like a whole topic on its own, but essentially, like SIBO is more or less IBS, but small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So for those with digestive issues, if you don't know about SIBO, just make sure you Google SIBO. So yeah, for the KPV, it's calming down the inflammation in your body. I do think that there's probably some sort of like yeast or fungal or mold dynamic, because I know you had that history with mold, and then
Totally. I did.
um, some of your symptoms just make me think fungal overgrowth as well. So I think
Right.
for you, it's probably reducing fungal stuff and calming down inflammation, which is giving your body a chance to just breathe and to focus on things that have been pushed to the side because it's been busy dealing with all of the things that are ramping up the inflammation. Things you can get stuck in a cycle. Your body gets stuck in a cycle sometimes where it's almost like even if you're beyond the exposure to the mold or whatever it was, it's left an imprint.
Right.
And so you need to break that cycle. And I think maybe to a degree, peptides also just break that cycle, depending on the one that you use.
So that's a great answer. And that totally makes sense to me. And I love the way you talk about breaking a cycle because I feel like I've been trapped, though you've explained a lot to me. My system's just been stuck in fear internally, almost like I almost see it like an internal PTSD almost. And then the body needs to break that. Do you believe the peptides, though? Because a lot of the drugs out in the world they're just, tamping down. They're not healing the system. But with natural medicine? Do you believe that these peptides are not only calming my system, but are they actually doing healing that eventually you don't need them, or do you think they're always sort of part of a regiment
They
down the road?
are accomplishing healing. So, I mean, for example, even just thinking about the fungal overgrowth, for example, like some people, maybe the KPV is enough to just reduce and eliminate the fungal overgrowth, whereas with other people, they might have other root causes involved. So, they might use the KPV, which reduces fungal overgrowth, but they might also have heavy metals, which attracts the fungal back. So when they stop the
Right,
KPV, the fungal stuff comes back, but then
right.
the KPV might also be calming down inflammation enough that they're able to better tolerate a heavy metal detox. So I feel like they go hand in hand with other therapies as well.
Beautiful. Now, one of the things for me, it's always about my nervous system. So when I am having these inflammatory experiences, we all have it differently. I know you've shown me, but for me, it's very much jumping out of my skin. Like there's this akathisia component. It's so hard to tease out if it's akathisia or mast cell activation, which you've also taught me about. Maybe you can speak to that a bit, and whether it's these histamines in my body. But what I notice is that feeling in my body is less. And that's been so unbelievable. I'm still waking up with it a bit, but it's not nearly as bad. And I'm still having it when I eat a bit, but it's not nearly as bad. And that's what I'm blown away by. I just have more sense of calm. And I've come off a carnivore diet and I'm eating more. And last time we tried me coming off a carnivore diet, we had to do a number of these steps, and I'm finding it's not as hard to come off. Um, so I don't know if you can speak to a bit why these amino acids would be affecting my nervous system. I guess maybe you did a bit, but I'm just so curious. Why do you think my nervous system seems to be a little better?
Yeah, well, I mean, less inflammation. So, I mean, inflammation is good for us sometimes because the body is using it to try and stimulate healing and repair and also to get rid of pathogens. But in and of that, the cytokines and the interleukins and some of the other things that are released with these inflammatory responses can be also triggering for the nervous system.
Okay.
So, especially if you have like pathogens, viruses, bacteria, fungal, whatever, wandering around through the system, through the body systemically, they're more likely to be targeted by the immune system and have some of these compounds maybe be released too close to the immune, too, I'm losing my
No,
thoughts,
it's
but
good. No, it's great.
too
It's
close to
really
the
good.
nervous system. That's what I'm
Right.
meaning to say. Yeah,
Okay.
so I think the
That makes
KPV
sense.
calming down the inflammation, less cytokine release, less interleukin, less prostaglandins means less impact on the nervous system.
Very helpful. I am trying to tease out too, and I know akathisia is a very new thing that people are talking about more and more, and I really appreciate how you're getting to, try to understand something that really no one knows about. But I'm trying to tease out more what is akathisia for me and what is mast cell or histamines. And as I say, it's way better with the peptides, but I still have that feeling. And that's really where I want to find the next step. Now that you start to feel 10, 15, actually probably 30% better now, then I have more room now to say, I really want to go that extra distance. I actually think I can, and I want your thoughts on, yeah, maybe things I can do around that and maybe tease them out and then sort of say where you think I can go next.
Yeah, I mean, I think with akathisia, a true case of akathisia would involve high serotonin,
Okay.
which most of us think serotonin is a good thing because it's the neurotransmitter that makes us joyful and happy. But serotonin is also inflammatory, so you can have excess serotonin as well, and then it's inflammatory, and then it becomes problematic for your central nervous system. So, if we think it's a true case of akathisia, then we're thinking about high levels of serotonin, but the serotonin is probably being released in response to inflammation. So, for example, the majority of our serotonin is released from like the mucosal lining in our gut. So, if there's issues with the gut, then you're going to have more serotonin release. And we see this in other conditions as well. So, for example, in autism, it's been found that there's high serum levels of serotonin as well, which is also likely due to gut inflammation. If we start thinking about mast cell activation, then we're thinking about all of the things that mast cells release, they also release serotonin. They release interleukins, they release tryptase, they release cytokines, and they release histamine. And then it can also be a bit hard to differentiate between, okay, is it histamine intolerance or is it mast cell activation? And it is really hard to access practitioners who are knowledgeable and able to actually test for mast cell activation syndrome or disorder, or histamine intolerance. All of the testing and diagnosis and everything is hard to access. So sometimes you just have to think about the commonalities and the patterns and just in general, okay, well, I know this about mast cells, or I know this about histamine intolerance, or this about serotonin. What can I do to reduce those things? And so for you, it's like we're just focusing on reducing inflammation. You've done so much testing already, and I don't think they did test you for mast cell activation,
No.
but it's almost like you put so much energy and money into that already. Let's just focus on inflammation reduction and see how far we get with that. And it seems to be working. So,
Okay, I first have to say, like when I was younger, I would want to talk all day about the Toronto Maple Leafs, let's say, or great shows on TV. Listening to you talk is like it's a party. I'm not kidding. Like I just really enjoy so much how much information you have and knowledge. And this is my jam right now. Obviously, I'm healing, but it's also beautiful to understand it. And there's so many people struggling. Akathisia is the worst, and there are so many people. And I personally, just me have never heard, I've never heard someone talk about it being over serotonin and bringing mast cell together with akathisia and it may be high serotonin. That was just mind blowing. So I don't know, but I just blown away. So thank you for that. And I want to understand that though. So do you really think, so it's almost like what I get from you is it's a circle where my body is inflamed, so it's producing more serotonin, and the serotonin's causing the mast cell, and it's causing the akathisia, which is causing more inflammation. And I'm just in this, like you said, it's a cycle, like you said before, and we need to break that cycle, and by first and foremost tamping down the inflammation.
yeah.
Mind blowing. And
Yeah. And I
you
think,
explain that so perfectly, even for me. So how do we, how do we do that now? Because how do we, because the peptides are helping, what would be other steps you would see in general for me, or for someone in my position right now?
I should state as well that I'm by no means like an akathisia expert. I really didn't even know about this condition until you brought it to my attention. And this is just based on what I've read in the scientific literature and also from reading case stories and stories from other people with akathisia. So, just to
I'm
preface
like,
everything.
I know.
Um, but for you, because you're so sensitive and reactive to
Yeah.
everything, I really just wanted to like do something that was really effective for bringing down the inflammation to help you tolerate more things and tolerate more things that
Right.
we could try.
Beautiful.
And it seems like the peptides did that. So now we
Yeah.
can go on to like working on some of the things that I might even just consider like basics. And with other people, I would have started with these other things, but because you were so
Right.
sensitive, we didn't. Um,
Beautiful.
so like the stomach acid, making sure that you're actually breaking down and absorbing all your nutrients, that you're not leaving food passing through the digestive tract, which is able to be putrefied by like pathogenic or opportunistic microbes.
Right.
Working on digestion in any means,
Yes.
reducing. I mean, we've done a little bit of testing for you, and I know that
Yeah.
yeast was present at one point. So probably working on reducing fungal
The yeast.
overgrowth. Yeah.
Right. Beautiful. And in that respect, for me, which is interesting, people always, you taught me this, people always think, well, if you have a digestion, if you're going to have problems in your gut and breaking down things, you would have all these stomach problems. And that's not necessarily, I mean, I do have it now and again when I change diets or when I shift things, but for me, it's more if I eat something that's not good, like gluten, for instance, 2 days later, I'm so depressed. Or, if it's a milk product, I'll have a reaction a day or two later. I'll be so anxious, or I'll get psoriasis from eggs. So in my body. So and it doesn't come immediately. So it's really hard to tell. And you've really helped me, look at this. It's hard to tell, is that food the problem? Where are the issues? How do we heal our gut when it's hard to tell what's causing what? So
Hmm.
in general, any thoughts on that and what can be done? It's, for specifically someone who cannot tell what's causing what.
Yeah,
You know,
it does make it more challenging when it's hard for you to tell
I know,
which things
I
are
know,
the issue. And
I know.
like sometimes food sensitivity testing is useful, but I don't really like to on it very much, especially for Canadians because it's so expensive to get done here and it doesn't. For example, like a food sensitivity test will tell you if you're sensitive to something and it's mediated by a very specific immunoglobulin, which is IgG, or sometimes they do IgM, but you can have sensitivities to foods for a lot of reasons. So, for example, if you've had candida for a long time, you might just be like really sensitive to yeast, and that might not
Right.
be picked up on an allergy test. It really depends. Or you
Yeah.
might be sensitive to something because it has histamine or salicylates or other compounds in it, and that would not be picked up on a food sensitivity panel. So, I think for you, keeping things pretty simple as far
Right.
as like meals go so that it is a bit easier to tell if you react to something and you can keep a food journal.
Right.
Um, and that would be helpful too. I think also just the more we work on reducing inflammation, the less reactive your immune system will become.
Right. Right.
Um,
That's interesting.
mhm.
Okay. No, I understand that, and it's neat because you taught me. I used to eat blueberries, and I'm like, they don't fall under any of the categories, and you're like, yes, they do. They're solicites, isn't that correct? And because aren't they? I think you had told me that, and so I realized that was causing an itchiness just randomly. So there are so many different potentials, and it's just for me, I know trying to really be aware of what is that reaction. And does it always, in a lot of ways, come down to the histamine? Explain to me the histamine aspect, because that is becoming such for so many people now. It's the buzzword is histamines. And that you're having a histamine reaction or a mast cell, but they seem to be the same. So maybe you can explain that to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, the symptoms for high, like excess histamine or histamine intolerance are so broad and far-ranging. They range from, like you said, itching to rash to urticaria, to, well, hives, um, to it can be sometimes GI symptoms. So some people will get stomach upset from histamine. I even had a client who she thought she had SIBO and it turned out to be histamine intolerance.
Wow.
Um, yeah, there's a lot of different symptoms for histamine. You can test, so there are ways to test for it. You can do like a serum histamine test, but you need to be reacting and releasing histamine. You can also there are certain functional medicine tests. So if you I can't remember the name of the main lab. It switched names within the last year, so I can't actually remember it right now. But there is like a functional medicine lab that does. Um, you can order a panel and get your blood drawn and test for histamine as well as a couple other things that are relevant to mast cells and histamine intolerance. So that's a possibility as well. But for us in Canada, it's hard to access those things. So again, you kind of just want to do more of an elimination situation and strategically add things back in so you can try and figure out if those are the things you're reacting to. So, for example, for you, if we were trying to figure out if you were sensitive to histamine, you could eliminate all of the things that are currently in your diet that are high histamine for 2 weeks
Right.
and then add one of them back in, see if you respond or not, wait 3 days. If you don't have a reaction, add another thing in 3 days later, wait and
Yeah.
see how you respond. And if you are responding to the things with histamine, then it's pretty likely that it's a histamine issue.
Well, what I like so much about what you do is that it's a full body thing. So, because it almost seems like someone who's got candida's got histamines, got mast cell, got, and all these seem like terms, but you have to lower, like you say, and I know that's what I love about you work on lower the inflammation, and then the body can start healing, and you can obviously lower what you're eating, the potential triggers, but ultimately they're just triggers because the whole system is not working well. So histamine is actually a symptom
Mm-hmm.
release, or candida is a symptom, and I think that has been helpful. I mean, that's yeah. And that's why with the peptides, it's been so interesting because it's immediately lowered the inflammation. So everything seems less reactive. Um,
Yeah, and so
but
now
when
you
you
can
do,
maybe figure, like when you do an elimination diet, you'll be able to tell better.
exactly, and I'm noticing that. Like I'm actually noticing, and I'm tolerating foods I wasn't able to tolerate before because of KPV. For instance, cherries. I used to eat cherries; they make me crazy, frozen cherries, and because and it just my system isn't reacting
Hmm.
in the same way.
Well,
Um,
cherries are a natural source of serotonin,
whoa,
I believe.
wow, well that's
Actually, it
not
might
good.
just be melatonin. Let me check.
Yeah, find out because that's interesting because I'm eating them and maybe if I stopped them completely, I wouldn't have, maybe that's why there's still a bit of
Okay.
this
Tart
reaction.
cherries have a small amount of melatonin and tryptophan, an
Oh,
amino acid used in production of serotonin and melatonin.
very interesting. So maybe I'll stop eating cherries for a little while and see if that even tamps things down more. Um, do you think? Does that sound like a smart idea?
You
Or,
could try that.
okay. Now, with Candida, I mean, that's the other thing I know many years ago, everyone had Candida. It was the thing. And now people have, I don't hear it as much. Histamine seems to be the bigger buzzword. But how do we know we have Candida? Because I know there's the classic way where, you see it in your poop and you have itchiness, but how do you know that I have candida severely? Because we all have some candida in us, and I don't see it in my poop when I poop. I don't see, it seems pretty hard, pretty normal based on my understanding of it. And so I'm trying to understand why do we know that I have potentially candida being the
Yeah,
issue.
not everyone will see yeast in their stool, and some people look for the signs in the mouth, so you might have a coating on the tongue, but not even everyone will have it there. And then also the coating on the tongue can be from different bacteria as well, so it's not conclusive.
Okay.
Um, I mean, I usually refer to testing, and so I've seen on like one of your organic acids tests,
Yeah.
there was some candida.
Was
And
it a high
then
amount? Like, was that a fairly high amount
I
compared to
don't
other
remember.
people? Yeah, man, no worries.
Yeah.
It's been almost a year ago.
Yep. And then sometimes it's just because of your history of psoriasis, I'm
Yeah,
thinking that it's candida too. So
very interesting. And I love that you do. So from that the oats test, what do you usually find out for your clients ultimately? Like, what does that give you? I've
the
always been
organic
fascinated.
acids test tests for some strains of mold and some candida. It also tests for Clostridia overgrowth, so it's looking for metabolites of things. So it's looking for metabolites of candida, mold, Clostridia, SIBO metabolites. Um, Neurotransmitters. So it kind of gives you an idea as to things that can be going on with neurotransmitters. It tests for metabolites of mitochondria, so it's an indicator for mitochondrial health. It's looking at markers of nutrition and markers of detoxification, so like glutathione and the methylation pathway, those are all things that it looks at.
Right. And those are super important too on a higher level, I guess, both for your obviously your nervous system, but your brain system, but also again it's isn't it kind of they all come back to the inflammatory system or how much
Yeah,
is
sometimes
inflammatory?
it's inflammation, but sometimes it's also you're missing like nutrition.
Okay, interesting.
Or you might have like some genetic variants where you just don't break down or build things as well because you don't have the as much of the enzymes. Or it can
Right.
speed things up too. These genetic variants, sometimes they speed everything up. So
Okay. And I get how do you balance with your clients because like you say there can be too much or too little. And especially if you tamp down inflammation too much, that can be a problem. But also, if it's too high, that can be a problem. And if you have too much serotonin, not enough serotonin, and I even noticed in my testing, for instance, my testosterone was low and then it was too high. And when your system's out of whack, isn't even the testing can sometimes give crazy readings. So, how do you make decisions when people can be all over the map? Is that,
yeah, I mean, I need to
yeah,
match the lab results to the symptoms and to what you're saying. So there's definitely a balance to be had there. And sometimes it is intuitive.
I noticed that with you. You're extremely intuitive, and I appreciate that. I really do because I think you have to bring both. It's an art and a science. I'm learning.
Hmm.
So, well, this was great. I
Hmm.
enjoyed this chatting. Yeah. Do you want to try? You want to?
Yeah, we could wrap it up there.